See if you can find your way back, Mom. My daughter and her husband laughed, leaving me stranded on a desolate service road deep in the Mojave Desert. I watched them drive away. They had no idea I was the sole heiress to a $33 million fortune, and they had just failed the final test. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. Imagine being in my dusty sneakers, watching the car carrying my beloved children vanish into the desert horizon. But let me tell you how I arrived at that life-altering moment. It all started 3 months earlier when I received the call that would change my life forever. I was baking a batch of my famous chocolate chip cookies in my small kitchen in Phoenix, Arizona, when the phone rang. Mrs. Carol Elizabeth Vance? A formal voice with a distinct Chicago accent inquired. Yes, that's me, I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. No one ever called me by my full name, except for official business. This is Mr. Reginald Blackwood from the law firm Blackwood & Sons in Chicago. I need to inform you about the estate of your great-great-uncle, Arthur Vance. I nearly dropped the phone. Great-great-uncle? I had never heard of any Arthur in the family. My mind immediately went to some kind of phone scam. At 67, you hear about all sorts of tricks. Look, sir, if this is a joke... I assure you it is no joke, ma'am. Your great-great-uncle passed away last month in Chicago. He was the last heir to a considerable family fortune. According to our records, you are his closest living relative. My heart began to pound faster. How much money are we talking about? $33 million US dollars, plus properties in 3 states. For a moment, I thought I had gone crazy. 33 million. The amount was so absurd I couldn't process it. My whole life, I had struggled to make ends meet on my teacher's pension. Mrs. Vance, are you still there? Yes, yes. Excuse me, but are you absolutely sure? Completely. However, there are specific conditions in the will. Your uncle was a peculiar man. He stipulated that the heir must prove worthy of the inheritance through a test of character. This is where things got interesting. My dear great-great-uncle, whom I apparently never met, had designed a sort of moral examination for his heirs. What kind of test? I asked, feeling a mixture of curiosity and distrust. You must travel to the American Southwest, specifically near the Mojave Desert, and prove you can handle adversity with dignity. The will is very specific. The heir must face a situation of abandonment and show resourcefulness, the ingenuity to resolve your situation. Abandonment, I don't understand. Your uncle specified that someone close to the heir must temporarily leave them alone in a challenging location, and the heir must find their way back using their own determination. It's a test of inner strength. It sounded completely insane, but $33 million US dollars makes even the most far-fetched ideas seem reasonable. And if I fail the test? Then the inheritance passes to the next candidate in the line of succession. Are there other candidates? Several distant cousins, but none with as strong a claim as you. I hung up the phone in a state of total shock. My first reaction was to call my children, Alex and Emily. They had always been the center of my world, especially after their father died when they were teenagers. Alex, my 35-year-old son, arrived that evening with his wife, Megan. They both worked in tech and always seemed stressed about money, especially since they bought the outrageously expensive house in San Francisco. Mom, are you sure this isn't a scam? Alex asked while Megan checked her laptop. I verified the firm, Megan said without looking up. Blackwood & Sons exists, it's legitimate. They have offices in Chicago and handle international estates. Emily, my 32-year-old daughter, arrived the next day from Portland, Oregon. She worked as a freelance graphic designer and was always short on cash, though she never complained directly. Mom, this sounds way too good to be true, she said, hugging me tight. Had you really never heard of this uncle? Never, but your grandmother never talked much about the family. You know, she was very private. Over the next few weeks, Reginald Blackwood sent us all the legal documents. Everything looked legitimate. The test was set to take place in a month. According to instructions, I was to travel to the Southwest with people I trusted, who would then leave me alone on a remote desert road for exactly 4 hours. After that time, I had to find my own way back to the resort. This is perfect, said Alex. Megan and I have wanted to visit Vegas for years. We can do this together. I can come too, added Emily. My clients can wait a week. Seeing my children so excited about the idea of helping me on this crazy adventure filled my heart. I thought about how proud they'd be when I inherited that fortune. I could finally help them financially for real, not just with the small loans I occasionally gave them. But something in their eyes when they talked about the money gave me a little chill. Was it excitement about helping me or about the inheritance? The flight to Las Vegas was scheduled for the following Tuesday. As I packed my suitcase, I had no idea my own children were planning something that would change our relationship forever. The flight to Las Vegas was strangely tense. Alex and Megan sat together, constantly whispering and checking their phones. Emily seemed nervous, which was unusual for her, normally the most relaxed of my children. "Everything okay, sweetie?" I asked when I saw her fiddling with her necklace nervously. "Yeah, Mom, it's just so much money. $33 million, she replied. 33 million was indeed a lot of money, enough to change lives completely. As the plane flew over the vast American landscape, I started making mental plans. I would pay off my children's mortgages, give them seed money for their businesses, maybe buy a bigger house where we could all gather for the holidays. The resort in Las Vegas was magnificent, right off the strip. It was the kind of place I never could have afforded on my teacher's pension. Reginald Blackwood had arranged everything, explaining that the travel expenses were covered by the estate. "The test will take place tomorrow afternoon," he informed me over the phone that night. "Your companions will take you to a specific point near Death Valley. They will leave you there at 3 p.m., and you must return to the hotel on your own by 7 p.m. And what if I don't make it? Then, unfortunately, the inheritance will pass to the next candidate." That night at dinner, I noticed something strange in my children's behavior. Alex and Megan kept whispering to each other, and Emily avoided eye contact. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" I asked. "If you have doubts, we can cancel everything and go home." "No, no," Alex quickly said. "We're here to support you, Mom. It's just, well, it's a super weird situation, right?" Megan nodded. "We've never heard of tests like this for inheritances." "Maybe the old guy was just eccentric," I commented. Rich people sometimes have strange ideas, but there was something else in their expressions, a tension I couldn't quite place. The next morning, we visited the Hoover Dam as regular tourists. It was impressive to be there, surrounded by so much modern engineering. Alex took tons of pictures, Megan made videos for her social media, and Emily bought souvenirs for her friends. "It's incredible to think that tomorrow this is going to change our lives," Emily said as we had lunch near the observation deck. "Your life, you mean?" Megan corrected. "It's Mom's inheritance." "But Mom has always taken care of us," Alex responded. "When she inherits, she'll surely—" He stopped abruptly, as if he realized he had said too much. "Surely what?" I asked, feeling my stomach clench. "Nothing, Mom, just that we know you're generous with us." I didn't sleep well that night. There was something about my children's attitude that worried me. For years, I had noticed how both of them struggled financially. Alex and Megan had that mortgage constantly stressing them out. Emily had mentioned several times how difficult it was to get stable clients. Was it possible they saw my inheritance as the solution to all their problems? The day of the test arrived with suffocating heat. We woke up early to avoid the tourist crowds. Reginald Blackwood had given us specific GPS coordinates for the drop-off point. "Remember," I told my children over breakfast, "you just have to leave me there for 4 hours. By 7, I'll be back at the resort, and this whole thing will be over." "What if something goes wrong?" Emily asked. "What if you get lost or something happens to you?" "Nothing's going to happen to me. It's just a test of wits, right? Besides, I'm sure there's some kind of supervision." The lawyer wouldn't put me in real danger. But as I said those words, a little doubt crept into my mind. Had I really thought this through? What kind of person designed such a strange test for an inheritance? At 2:30 p.m., we got into the rented SUV. Alex was driving, Megan was co-pilot with the GPS, and Emily and I were in the back. The destination was about 45 minutes from the resort, deep in a less traveled desert area. During the drive, my children were unusually silent. Only the sound of the GPS giving directions filled the car. "Nervous?" I asked to break the silence. "A little," Emily admitted. "It's just once we leave you there, there's no turning back, right?" "What do you mean?" "Well, the test officially begins. If I fail, we lose $33 million. I finished her sentence. "I know, but I'm not going to fail." Alex looked at me through the rearview mirror. His eyes held an expression I couldn't decipher. Mom, he said slowly, have you thought about what you're going to do with all that money? The question surprised me. What do you mean? You could you could do a lot of things with it. Until that moment, I had naturally assumed I would share the inheritance with them. They were my children, my family, the most important people in my life. But something about the way Alex asked the question made me hesitate. Was it possible they had assumed the same thing? That they were already counting on the money? We reached the exact GPS coordinates, an arid, scrubby area with a distant view of mountains. It was remote enough that there were no hikers or ATVs around. It was more desolate than I had imagined. Here it is, Megan announced, checking the GPS again. I got out of the SUV and looked around. There were some large boulders, sandy soil, and in the distance, the blurry outline of the Spring Mountains. The heat was intense, and there was no shade. Are you sure this is the right spot? I asked. These are the exact coordinates the lawyer gave, Megan confirmed. Alex and Emily hugged me. Their hugs felt different, longer, like final goodbyes instead of a 4-hour see you later. We love you, Mom, Emily said with tears in her eyes. I love you too. I'll see you back at the resort by 7. They got into the car, and I stood there, watching them drive away on the dusty road. It was then that I noticed something strange. Instead of heading back toward Las Vegas and the resort, they took a different direction. It was at that moment I heard the laughter from the car and the words that chilled me to the bone. See if you can find your way back, Mom. And so I stood there, completely alone, slowly realizing this was no inheritance test. Standing there, watching the SUV disappear in the wrong direction, was like getting punched in the gut. But I wasn't going to stand there and cry like a victim. 67 years of life had taught me a few things about survival. First, I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. My dear children had chosen the location well. Very smart, I muttered, checking my purse. I had my driver's license, some cash, a half-empty bottle of water, and my blood pressure medication. Basically, I was equipped for survival for, well, not very long. The desert midday sun is unforgiving, and I quickly realized I needed to find shade fast. The large boulders I had seen when we arrived would be my first shelter. As I walked toward them, my mind raced. This had not been an accidental stranding. My children had planned this. The question was why? And then, as if someone had flipped a light switch in my head, it all began to make sense. The strange behavior during the trip, the constant whispering, the way they had avoided talking to me directly about the money. The nerve of them, I muttered. I felt instantly bad for cursing my own children. But after what they had just done, they deserved it. Had they thought I would die out here, that they would simply get rid of me to collect the inheritance? If so, they had a lot to learn about Carol Elizabeth Vance. I reached the boulders and sat in the shade, thinking strategically. First, I needed water. Second, I needed to find my way back. Third, I needed to figure out exactly what was going on with this supposed inheritance. Something didn't add up. If Alex and Emily wanted to kill me for the money, why not just push me down the stairs back home? Why this elaborate charade in the desert? Unless they had been fooled too. As I pondered this, I heard a noise. Voices speaking English, getting closer. My first instinct was to hide, but then I thought, these might be exactly the people I needed to find. 3 men, clearly experienced desert hikers, appeared, walking back toward the main road. One of them, an older man with a gray beard, saw me sitting among the boulders and walked over to me. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked in a calm, slightly Western accent. "I'm a little lost," I admitted, feeling foolish but having few options. He approached closer, studying my face with concern. "Where's your party? Your family?" That was an excellent question. "They left," I said simply. The 3 men exchanged quick glances. Clearly, this wasn't normal. "They left? They just drove off?" The older man seemed genuinely shocked. "It's complicated. Ma'am, you can't stay out here. The desert at night is dangerous." "Where are you staying?" I gave him the name of the Las Vegas resort. His expression relaxed a bit. "We know that place. We can drive you, but..." He looked at my city sneakers and my clothes, clearly unsuitable for a long desert trek. "But it'll be hard on foot and it's a long haul. We have our ATV nearby." I looked at their gear. In 67 years of life, I had never considered riding an ATV through the backcountry. But then again, I had never considered my own children would abandon me in the desert either. How much do you charge to take me back? Normally $50. I checked my money. I had exactly $60 in cash plus some change. I accept. Are you sure? It's a rough ride and I'm 67 years old. I'm not an invalid. I cut him off. And I've survived worse things than an ATV ride. Well, technically I hadn't survived worse, but I wasn't going to admit that. The man smiled. I'm Ben. These are my friends, Ray and Gus. Carol, I replied. Carol Vance, from Phoenix. Yes. My friend Ray here lived in Arizona for a few years. He knows the area. Ray, a man with a friendly, sun-weathered face, walked over. Carol, you're from Phoenix. Beautiful city. For the first time in several hours, I smiled genuinely. Yes, it is. Ben prepped the most comfortable spot for me on the ATV, explaining how to brace myself and keep my balance. It wasn't as difficult as I had imagined, though definitely not comfortable. As we began the journey back toward Las Vegas, Ray drove nearby, keeping the conversation light. Can I ask why your family left you out here? Ray inquired gently. That was the million-dollar question, literally. I think they wanted me to die, I finally said. Ray almost stopped the ATV. Excuse me? It's about money, an inheritance. Your own family wants to kill you for money. When he put it that way, it sounded even more horrific. Ray quickly told Ben and Gus what I had said. The three exchanged disgusted looks and said several words that clearly were not compliments toward my children. In our community, Ben said, family takes care of their elders. They don't ditch them in the desert. In mine too, I replied sadly. At least I thought so. As we slowly made our way toward Las Vegas, I had time to think. A lot of time. The bumping of the ATV was hypnotic, and my mind started to truly process what had happened. My children had planned this. They had researched the law firm. They had feigned excitement about helping me. They had traveled with me to Nevada, all to bring me here and abandon me. But I still didn't understand the full motive. If I died, would they automatically inherit? Or was there something more? Ben, I said after a while, do you know of a quiet coffee shop in Vegas with decent Wi-Fi? Sure do. Why? I need to look into a few things. Something told me this inheritance story was far more complicated than my children knew. And if they were going to play dirty with me, it was time for Carol Elizabeth Vance to show them how the game was really played. The sun was beginning to set when we finally saw the lights of the strip in the distance. I had survived the abandonment, I had found help, and I had had 4 hours to think strategically. My dear children had no idea what was coming. We reached the resort at 8:30 p.m. Ben, Ray, and Gus absolutely refused to accept payment for the ride after I explained the full situation. Instead, Ray walked me all the way to the front desk to ensure I arrived safely. Need us to stick around? He asked, in case your kids show up and there's trouble. No, but thank you. I can handle my kids. What I didn't tell them was that I had a plan that required me to act like nothing had happened. The concierge looked at me in surprise. Mrs. Vance, where are your children? They came back an hour ago, asking for you. They seemed very worried. Worried? I almost laughed. Did they say where they went? I believe they went out to search for you. They left a message saying if you returned, to wait for them here. Perfect. That gave me time for my investigation. Is there a coffee shop nearby with computers? Yes, ma'am. 2 blocks north. There's one that's open 24 hours. I went up to my room, changed my clothes, washed the dust out of my hair, and headed to the coffee shop. It was time to find out what the heck was really going on. The first search was obvious. Reginald Blackwood, Chicago, lawyer. The results were interesting. Reginald Blackwood was real, but he primarily handled divorces and minor business disputes. There was no mention of multi-million-dollar international estates. Next, I searched for Arthur Vance, Chicago, inheritance in several languages. Nothing. No record of a recent death, no will, no mention in Chicago papers. Interesting. Then I searched Blackwood and Sons, inheritance desert abandonment. This is where things get truly fascinating. I found 3 newspaper articles, all from the last year, about elaborate scams involving fake inheritances and character tests in exotic locations. One in the Canadian Rockies, another in the Florida Everglades, and a third in the deserts of New Mexico. In all cases, the victims were elderly individuals with family members who expected to inherit. And in all cases, the victims had disappeared during the test. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about my children wanting my money. This was something much, much more sinister. I searched more specifically for inheritance scams, desert abandonment, and I found something that chilled me to the bone. An article about a 73-year-old woman, Margaret Johnson, found dead in the Mojave Desert 6 months ago. The police had closed the case as a lost hiker, but the family insisted she had been participating in an inheritance test. Margaret Johnson had traveled to Nevada with her son and daughter-in-law to claim a supposed inheritance of $20 million. She never returned from her test. I kept reading and found mentions of at least 5 similar cases in the last 2 years. All involved elderly people, all in remote locations. And in all cases, the families had been contacted by reputable-sounding law firms about inheritances from distant relatives. This was no ordinary scam. This was serial murder disguised as an inheritance fraud. And my children were part of it. The question was, did they know it was a murder scheme, or had they been fooled too? I printed all the articles I could and returned to the resort. It was 10:15 p.m. Alex, Megan, and Emily were in the lobby, talking agitatedly with the resort staff. When they saw me walk in, their faces showed a mixture of relief and surprise that seemed genuine. "Mom!" Emily ran over and hugged me tightly. "Thank God you're okay. We were desperate." Alex and Megan approached too. Alex had dark circles under his eyes, as if he really had been worried. "Where were you?" he asked. "We went back to the spot we left you at 7, and you weren't there." This was where I needed to be very careful. If I played my cards wrong, I could end up really dead. "You went back at 7?" I asked innocently. "But the test was until 7. You were supposed to pick me up." Alex and Megan exchanged a quick look. "No, Mom," Megan said slowly. "The instruction was to leave you there at 3 and that you'd return on your own. We went to check after 7 to make sure you had made it." "Really?" I feigned confusion. "I understood you were supposed to pick me up. That's why I waited until some local hikers helped me get back." The tension in their faces visibly relaxed. "So you completed the test?" Emily asked with barely disguised expectation. "I suppose so. I was there for the full 4 hours and made it back to the resort before midnight. It was a lie, of course, but I needed to see their reactions." "This means you inherited," Alex exclaimed, hugging me. $33 million. Their enthusiasm seemed genuine. Too genuine for someone who had just tried to murder their mother. I started to suspect that my children had been manipulated just as much as I had. The question was, by whom and why? "Have you talked to the lawyer?" I asked. "We tried calling Reginald Blackwood, but he's not answering," Megan said. "He's probably asleep. There's a 2-hour time difference with Chicago." "We'll call him tomorrow," I said. "I'm exhausted now. It's been a very long day." We all headed to our rooms, but before going into mine, I paused. "Just a curious question," I said casually. "How did you find this Reginald Blackwood? I mean, how did he know to contact me?" Alex frowned. "Didn't he call you directly? That's what you told us." "Yes, but I wonder how he got my number. It's not in any public directory." "Must be genealogical records," Megan suggested. "Lawyers have resources to find heirs." "Of course," I nodded. "Just curious." I went into my room and locked the door. Then I pulled out the papers I had printed and studied them carefully. According to the articles, the pattern was always the same. Elderly people contacted about inheritances from distant relatives, strange tests in remote locations, and families who cooperated, completely convinced they were helping their loved one win a fortune. In no case did the families seem to know their loved ones were going to die. In all cases, they seemed genuinely surprised and devastated when the victims disappeared. This suggested that there was someone else running the operation, and I had survived the test. I had come back when I was supposed to die. That meant whoever was behind this didn't yet know I had discovered their scheme. I had an edge, but not for long. Tomorrow, when my children tried to contact the non-existent Reginald Blackwood, the plan would fall apart. And when that happened, whoever was behind this would know I had survived and that I posed a threat. I needed to act fast, but first I needed to figure out exactly who had organized all of this and why. And I had the terrible feeling that when I found out, I'd wish I had died in the desert. The next morning, I woke up with a clear plan. I needed more information before this whole charade fell apart. At 8 a.m., I went down to breakfast and met my children, who had obviously gotten up early to call Chicago. "So," I asked, pouring myself some coffee, "did you talk to the lawyer?" The expression on their faces told me everything before they spoke. "The number doesn't work," Alex said slowly. "You mean it's out of service?" "Did you try the main firm's office?" I asked, feigning concern. Megan nodded. "The firm exists, but when we asked about Reginald Blackwood, they said no lawyer by that name works there." Emily looked like she was about to cry. "Does this mean the whole thing was a scam?" "Not necessarily," I lied. "Maybe there's a name mix-up." "Do you have any of the emails or documents he sent you?" Alex immediately pulled out his laptop. "I have all the emails right here." I carefully reviewed the emails. The email address was our blackwood@ansonslaw.com, which looked legitimate at first glance. The attached documents were full of convincing legal language and official-looking seals. "Can I try contacting him?" I asked. Sometimes lawyers respond better to their direct clients. "Of course," Megan said, clearly desperate for it to work. I went up to my room and dialed the number from my phone. As expected, it was disconnected, but there was something else I needed to verify. I called the main number for Blackwood & Sons in Chicago from my room. "Blackwood & Sons, how may I help you?" A woman with a crisp Midwestern accent answered. "Hello, I'm trying to locate a lawyer named Reginald Blackwood who contacted me about an inheritance. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't have any lawyer by that name at our firm. Are you sure about the name?" "Completely sure. He sent me emails from an address belonging to your firm. I'm afraid someone is fraudulently using our name. This has been happening recently. Could you give me more details?" I explained the basic situation without mentioning where I was. "Oh my gosh," the woman said. "Ma'am, this sounds exactly like the cases we've been reporting to the police. They've been using our name for fake inheritance scams. Are you safe right now?" "For now, yes, but I need to figure out who is behind this. Have you contacted the authorities?" "Not yet. I need more information first." "Ma'am, I urge you to contact the police immediately. We've had reports that these scams have resulted in missing persons." I hung up with cold confirmation of what I already suspected. This was definitely part of a larger, likely international operation. But now I had a more immediate problem. My children were about to find out there was no inheritance, and whoever had organized this would know I had survived. I went back down to the lobby where my children were anxiously waiting. "So?" Emily asked. "Bad news?" I said solemnly. "I spoke with the main office. They are investigating a fraud where someone has been using their name for scams. Reginald Blackwood does not exist." The silence that followed was deafening. "So there's no inheritance?" Alex asked in a hollow voice. "No inheritance." Megan slumped into a chair in the lobby. "But why? Why would someone make us come all the way out here just to scam us? We didn't give them any money." That was the crucial question. "I don't know," I lied. "Maybe they expected us to pay some kind of legal fee later on." But I knew the real reason was much more sinister. "What do we do now?" Emily asked. "I guess we go back to Phoenix," I said. "At least we got to see Vegas." As we went up to pack, I noticed someone watching us from across the lobby, an older, well-dressed man who quickly looked away when I saw him. In my room, as I was packing, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Vance?" The voice was familiar. Reginald Blackwood. "Where the heck are you?" I asked, deciding to play innocent. "There have been some complications, ma'am. I urgently need to see you to explain the situation." "What kind of complications?" "It's preferable we speak in person." "Could you meet me in an hour? I'm in Las Vegas." This was getting interesting. "Where?" "At the Bellagio Cafe downtown. It's a public, safe place." "Why don't you just come to the resort?" "I prefer a more discreet location. There have been some documentation issues that require privacy." Of course there were problems. The problems were named. Carol Vance is still alive. "All right," I said, "but I want my children to come with me." "I would prefer you come alone, ma'am. These are confidential legal matters." My children know about the inheritance. Nothing is confidential. There was a pause. Very well. In 1 hour. I hung up and immediately went down to the lobby to talk to my children. That was the lawyer, I told him. He wants to meet with us to explain what happened. Seriously. Alex seemed hopeful. So maybe there is an inheritance? I don't know, but we're going to find out. What I didn't tell them was that I had the terrible feeling we were walking straight into a trap, but I also knew it was my only chance to find out who was behind all of this. Half an hour later, we were in a cab on our way to the Bellagio Cafe. During the ride, I explained to my children that they needed to be on high alert. Why? Emily asked. Because something smells fishy about this whole situation. Keep your eyes open. The Bellagio Cafe was a classic spot on the strip, full of tourists and locals. When we arrived, I immediately saw the man who had been watching us at the resort. He was sitting at a table in the back, dressed in an expensive suit. Mrs. Vance, he stood up as we approached. I'm Reginald Blackwood. I studied his face carefully. He looked about 60. Gray hair, an accent that could be East Coast or a good imitation. But there was something in his eyes I didn't like, a coldness that didn't match his professional smile. These are my children, Alex and Emily, and Alex's wife, Megan. A pleasure, he said, shaking hands. I apologize for the complications yesterday. What kind of complications? Alex asked directly. Reginald sat down and folded his hands. There's something I need to confess. The inheritance is real, but the situation is more complicated than I initially explained. Here came the real scam. Your great-great-uncle Arthur had some enemies, people who also claimed rights to the estate. For security reasons, we had to make the test seem like a failure to protect you from these people. He was a liar, I'll give him that, very creative. So I did pass the test? I asked, brilliantly. The fact that you returned on your own demonstrated exactly the type of character your uncle was looking for. And now what? Megan asked. Now we need to safely transfer the inheritance, but there are additional procedures. We'll need you to sign some documents and transfer a small amount as collateral to cover international legal costs. And there it was, the real scam. It wasn't murder after all, but a more traditional money scam. Or at least that's what I hoped. How much money? I asked. 25,000 US dollars. A minimal amount compared to the 33 million you'll inherit. Alex and Megan looked at each other. Emily frowned. Can't that amount be deducted from the inheritance? Emily asked. Unfortunately, international banking regulations require that costs be paid in advance. A lie, a complete lie. But now I had a decision to make. Should I play along to find out more about the operation, or end this here? The decision was made for me when I saw two men walk into the cafe and sit near the exit. They weren't ordering anything, just watching. I need to think about it, I said, and that's a lot of money. Of course, Reginald smiled. But I noticed his smile didn't reach his eyes. But Mrs. Vance, there is a time constraint. The other claimants are pushing. And if we don't secure the inheritance soon, how much time do I have? Until tomorrow morning. Until tomorrow to decide if I wanted to be a living fraud victim or a dead heiress. It was time for Carol Elizabeth Vance to show these criminals who they were messing with. That night, after saying goodbye to Reginald with promises we would make a decision in the morning, I gathered my children in my resort room. I need to tell you something, I said, locking the door, and I need you to listen completely before you react. The three of them sat on the bed looking worried. This whole thing is a scam, a very dangerous one. I told them everything, my investigation at the coffee shop, the articles about missing people, the pattern of murders disguised as fake inheritances. Mom, that's impossible, Alex said. Are you saying someone brought us all the way out here to kill you? Exactly. But why? Emily asked. We're not rich. What would they gain? That's the question I need to answer. But first, I need you to understand that we are in real danger. Megan had been quiet, but now she spoke. If this is true, why does the lawyer want money now instead of just killing you? Good question. Maybe because I survived when I was supposed to die. They had to improvise. I showed them the articles I had printed. As they read them, I watched their faces change from disbelief to horror. My God, Emily whispered, all these people, all brought to remote locations by their families, exactly like you brought me. Alex looked sick. You think we... We were part of this without knowing? I think we were all manipulated. The question is by whom and why. What do we do? Megan asked. First, we need to get out of Las Vegas. But before that, I need to figure out how they contacted me originally. Alex frowned. What do you mean? Someone had to give them my information. My phone number, details about our family, enough information to create a convincing story about a great-great-uncle. That information came from somewhere. Megan straightened up. Are you suggesting someone we know is involved? It's possible. Or maybe our data was sold or stolen from somewhere. Emily looked scared. So what now? Do we just leave? No. First, we're going to spring a trap. The three of them looked at me like I was crazy. Mom, Alex said carefully, these are dangerous criminals. We can't take them on ourselves. We're not taking them on. We're going to give them exactly what they want, but on our terms. I explained my plan. It was risky, but it was our only chance to get real evidence about who was behind the operation. Tomorrow, I'm going to call Reginald and tell him I agree to pay the $25,000. But I'm going to insist that the transfer be made from the resort bank, with all of you present. And then what? Megan asked. Then we'll see who shows up to collect the money and how they react when they find out there's no real cash. No real cash? Obviously, I don't have $25,000 in cash. But they don't know that. Emily looked nervous. What if they get angry? What if they try to hurt us? That's why we'll do this in a public place with witnesses. And that's why you'll all be ready to call the police at the exact moment. This is insane, Alex muttered. Maybe. But the alternative is to run and allow these criminals to continue killing elderly people. How many more are going to die while we hide in Phoenix? That night, none of us slept well. But the next morning, we were ready. At 9 a.m., I called Reginald. I've decided to proceed with the payment, I told him. But I need to do it through the resort's bank for security reasons. Mrs. Vance, that could complicate the process. It's the only way I feel comfortable transferring that much money. Plus, my bank in Phoenix requires in-person verification for large international transfers. There was a pause. What time? Does 11 work for you? Perfect. We'll meet in the resort lobby. After hanging up, I met with my children to go over the plan one more time. Remember, I told them, you'll be in the lobby but separated. Alex near the concierge desk, Megan near the entrance, Emily near the elevators. If anything goes wrong, one of you calls the police immediately. What if they really try to hurt you when they find out you don't have the money? Emily asked. That's why Alex is going to record everything on his phone. And that's why we're doing this in the most public place possible. At 10:45, we went down to the lobby. My children positioned themselves according to the plan, pretending to read magazines or check their phones. At 11 sharp, Reginald appeared, but he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by two men I recognized from the cafe the day before. Mrs. Vance? He greeted me with his fake smile. Ready to proceed? Of course. Are these gentlemen from your firm? Associates, he said vaguely, to ensure everything is processed correctly. We headed toward the resort's banking service area. The bank employee received us professionally. Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you? I need to make an international transfer of $25,000, I said, certainly. Do you have an account with us? No, but I have cash to deposit and transfer. Perfect. Could I see your ID and the destination account details? This was where things were going to get interesting. Reginald, I said, could you give the gentleman the account details? Reginald hesitated for a moment, then he pulled out a paper with banking information. And do you have the $25,000 in cash? The bank employee asked me. Ah, I said, feigning confusion. I thought I could transfer it from my account in Phoenix. For that, we would need authorization from your Phoenix bank. Ma'am, for large international transfers, it's more common to use cash or a local account. I watched Reginald's expression begin to change. Mrs. Vance, he said with a tight smile, you didn't bring the cash? Well, not exactly. I don't usually carry that much. Then how did you plan to make the payment? The moment of truth had arrived. I figured we could work out some kind of payment plan, or maybe... Ma'am, Reginald's voice changed completely. The professional mask dropped. We need that money today. I understand, but... One of the men accompanying him moved closer. Maybe we should continue this conversation in private. That's when I knew my plan had worked. They had shown their true colors, and Alex was recording everything from his position near the concierge desk. But I also realized I might have underestimated exactly how dangerous the situation would get. In private, turned out to be exactly as threatening as it sounded. Reginald and his two associates escorted me out of the banking area toward a quieter corner of the lobby. I could see my children tensing up from their positions, but I gave them a subtle signal to stay calm. "Mrs. Vance," Reginald said, his voice now completely devoid of former professional courtesy, "it seems there is a misunderstanding about our agreement." "There's no misunderstanding," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I just need more time to organize the transfer." One of the men, a large guy with a scar on his cheek, leaned in close. "Time's up, Grandma." "Grandma?" I straightened up. "Young man, I suggest you maintain a respectful tone." Despite the dangerous situation, I couldn't help myself. This third-rate goon thought he could intimidate me with cheap insults. Clearly, he didn't know Carol Elizabeth Vance. Reginald intervened before the situation escalated further. "What my colleague means is that we have strict time limits. The other claimants are pushing." "What other claimants?" I asked. "Yesterday, you said I was the only legitimate heir." Another lie uncovered? Their stories were falling apart. "The situation has evolved," he said vaguely. "That's why we need to proceed today. And I'm telling you, I need more time." The second man, younger but equally intimidating, spoke for the first time. "Maybe you don't understand the urgency of the situation, ma'am." "Oh, I understand the urgency perfectly," I replied. "What I don't understand is why 3 professional men are so desperate for money that I don't even have." It was a mistake. The words came out before I could stop them. Reginald looked me straight in the eye. "What do you mean money you don't even have?" "I mean that $25,000 is not money I have immediately available." "But last night you said you would proceed with the payment." "I said I would proceed. I didn't say I had the cash in my pocket." The tension in the air thickened. Reginald exchanged glances with his two associates. "Mrs. Vance," he said slowly, "are you playing games with us?" "I'm not playing games with anyone. I'm a 67-year-old woman trying to understand a complicated situation about an inheritance. An inheritance you know perfectly well doesn't exist." There it was. The confession I needed. Alex better be recording this. "Excuse me?" I feigned shock. "Come on, ma'am. We know you looked it up online. We know you found the other cases." Crap. They had been watching me closer than I thought. "I don't know what you're talking about." Reginald smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "The coffee shop on the Strip. Last night, 3 hours reviewing articles about fake inheritances and missing people. They had been tracking my every move. This was far more sophisticated than I had imagined." "You've been spying on me?" "Mrs. Vance, you represent a very serious problem for our operation. Your operation of killing elderly people for sport." "Killing is a strong word," the Scarface man said. "We prefer to think of it as final solutions for families with financial problems." "Families with financial problems? My family doesn't have financial problems." "Oh, don't they?" Reginald pulled out a tablet and slid it toward me. "Alex and Megan owe $180,000 on their mortgage, plus $50,000 in credit card debt. And Emily has lost 3 major clients this year and is 2 months behind on her rent." My blood ran cold. They knew intimate details about my children's finances. "How did you get that information?" "We have resources, ma'am, and connections with people who understand that family financial problems sometimes require creative solutions." "Did someone in my family contact you?" "Not directly, but when people are desperate for money, they sometimes share information without realizing it. Online forms, loan applications, surveys promising cash prizes." Megan. I remembered she was always filling out online forms, trying to win contests, applying for new credit cards. "So you chose us because my children need money?" "Exactly. Financially stressed families are more likely to cooperate with inheritance schemes, especially when they think they're going to receive millions." "And what do you gain? If there's no real inheritance, why kill the victims?" Reginald exchanged glances with his associates. They were clearly debating how much to tell me. "There are clients who pay very well for discreet elimination services," he finally said. "Clients? Who would pay to kill random strangers?" "They're not random strangers, ma'am. They are very specific. Elderly people with considerable savings, no clear wills, and heirs desperate for money. The realization hit me like a punch. The heirs paid to kill their own relatives. It's more subtle than that. The heirs never know they are paying for a murder. They think they are paying legal fees to expedite legitimate inheritances. But my children never paid anything. Your case was different, experimental. We wanted to see if we could eliminate the client cost and simply take the victim's savings directly. My savings? I'm a retired teacher. I don't have considerable savings. Reginald consulted his tablet again. According to our records, you have $58,000 in savings, plus a fully paid off house valued at $200,000. And that's worth murdering me for? For an experiment, yes. An experiment. They had planned to kill me as part of an experiment. How many people have you killed? In the last 3 years, we have successfully processed 42 cases. 42 murdered people. And I was going to be the 43rd. And now what? Are you going to kill me right here in the resort lobby? Of course not. That would be too conspicuous. The younger man spoke. Your family is going to receive a call this afternoon. They'll be informed that you had a tragic accident while exploring the desert alone. You slipped and fell down a ravine. And my children will believe that? Your children will be devastated, but they'll inherit your house and savings without legal complications. They'll be grateful. It was a horrible plan in its simplicity. There's just one problem. I said, what's that? My children know about you. I told them everything last night. The expressions on their face changed immediately. What exactly did you tell them? Reginald asked in a dangerous voice. Everything. The articles about the other victims. Your fake identities, the murder plan. You're lying. Want to bet your freedom on that? Reginald looked around the lobby, clearly searching for my children. He spotted them in their positions, and for the first time since this conversation started, he looked nervous. Even if it's true, he said, you have no evidence. Oh, don't I? I smiled. Alex has been recording this entire conversation since the moment it started. My son has already sent the recording to 3 different email addresses. If anything happens to any of us, that recording goes straight to the FBI. Plus, I continued, I have local contacts, the hikers who found me, who know exactly where I am and who I'm with. If I don't check in this afternoon, they'll come looking. That was also a lie, but these criminals didn't know that. Reginald looked furious, but he was also calculating his options. What do you want? He finally asked. I want you to tell me exactly how your organization operates, who else is involved, and how I can ensure you never contact my family again. And if we give you that information, what then? Then I will consider not sending the recording to the FBI immediately. Consider. It depends on how useful the information is. It was the most dangerous moment yet. They were either going to give me what I wanted or decide that killing my whole family was the only option. But I had come too far to back down now. Reginald stared at me for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. I could see the calculation in his eyes. Was it riskier to give me information or to try to permanently silence me? Very well, he finally said. But not here. Too many ears. I'm not going anywhere private with you. The resort balcony? It's public but more discreet. I looked toward my children. Alex had noticed the attention and was subtly moving closer. I gave him a subtle signal to keep his distance, but keep recording. Agreed, but my children are coming with me. Just you. Then there's no deal. Reginald sighed. You're making this very difficult, Mrs. Vance. You made this difficult when you decided to murder me for my savings. We went up to the resort's 5th floor patio. It was an open area overlooking the strip, with enough other guests around that I felt relatively safe. My children followed at a discreet distance. All right, I said once we sat down. Start talking. Reginald ordered a coffee, as if we were having a normal business meeting. What specifically do you want to know? Everything? How did you start? How many people are involved? How do you select victims? We started 4 years ago, he began. Initially, it was just a traditional scam operation. Fake inheritances, processing fees, that sort of thing. But you weren't killing people. No. That evolved when we realized that older victims often had significant savings we could access directly. How? The Scarface man spoke. Elderly people are trusting. Once we establish the relationship with the inheritance story, it's easy to get banking information, account numbers, even convince them to temporarily transfer money for legal costs. But why kill them? Why not just steal the money and disappear? Because victims eventually realize they've been scammed, Reginald explained. And they file police reports. Bodies don't file reports. The coldness with which he described murder sent shivers down my spine. How do you kill them? It depends on the location. In remote places like the desert, exposure and dehydration do the job. In other places, more elaborate accidents. And the families never suspect? Why would they suspect? They were the ones who drove their loved ones to the place where they died. They feel responsible, guilty. They don't ask hard questions. It was psychologically brilliant and utterly disgusting. How many people are involved in your organization? At different levels, about 20. But only the three of us know the entire operation. And the other levels? Researchers who get information on potential families, actors who play roles as lawyers, specialists in fake documents, local coordinators in different states and countries. Do you only operate in the Southwest? Oh no. Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Florida, Alaska, anywhere that's remote enough to justify an international or cross-country trip, but secluded enough for credible accidents. And who runs the whole operation? Here, Reginald hesitated. That information is above our pay grade. Is there someone higher up? There are investors, people who finance the initial operations in exchange for a percentage of the profits. What kind of people invest in serial murder? Wealthy people who see this as a business. Low initial investment, high returns, minimal risk because the victims are carefully selected. And have you never been caught? Once in Florida, but our local coordinator disappeared before he could be questioned. You killed him? The investors don't tolerate mistakes that jeopardize the operation. So they not only killed the victims, but also members of their own organization who made mistakes. How did you find me specifically? Your daughter-in-law, Megan, filled out an online application for a debt consolidation loan. It included detailed information about family income, property, and the health status of elderly relatives. Did Megan know that information would be sold? Of course not, but the terms and conditions she accepted included authorization to share data with business partners for relevant offers. Megan had accidentally sold my information to murderers. And that's why you selected me? Well, you were ideal. A widow, no economically dependent children, decent savings, good enough health to travel, and a family with financial problems who would be motivated by large inheritances. But my children knew nothing? Absolutely nothing. They genuinely believed they were helping you claim a legitimate inheritance. At least that was a relief. My children had been manipulated, not conspirators. And now what? Are you just going to let me go? Reginald exchanged glances with his associates. That depends. On what? On how reasonable you can be about the situation. What does that mean? It means we could reach an arrangement that benefits everyone. What kind of arrangement? You keep quiet about what you've discovered, and we compensate your family for the inconvenience. Compensation? Say enough to cover your children's debts, $100,000. They were offering me money to buy my silence about their murder operation. And if I refuse? Then we would have to consider less friendly options. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you reality, Mrs. Vance. We are 3 professional criminals. You are a retired teacher. Do you really think you can beat us? It was a fair question, but they had underestimated one important thing about Carol Elizabeth Vance. You know what? I said, standing up from the table. You're right. You're professional criminals, and I'm just a retired teacher. They seemed to relax, thinking I had accepted the reality of my situation. But there's one thing you didn't consider, I continued. Teachers spend 30 years dealing with bullies, liars, and manipulators, and we always win. Oh yeah? How? I smiled and pointed toward the patio entrance, where 2 Las Vegas Metro police officers had just appeared, heading directly toward our table. Because while you were explaining your operation to me, my children were calling the police. The look of panic on their faces was absolutely delicious. It turns out that underestimating a 67-year-old retired teacher had been their biggest mistake. The following minutes were chaotic in the most satisfying way possible. Reginald and his two associates tried to casually get up from the table, but the police officers had already blocked the two exits to the patio. "Mrs. Carol Vance?" one of the officers asked, approaching. "Yes, that's me. We received a call from your family about an attempted extortion." Reginald looked at me with a mixture of respect and hatred. "Very clever, ma'am. 30 years teaching teenagers prepared me to deal with criminals," I replied. "You're just grown-up versions of schoolyard bullies." The officers asked for IDs. Of course, Reginald's documents were fake, but not so fake that they would pass a serious police check. "These men," I explained to the officer, "are part of an international fraud and murder operation. They've been extorting $25,000 from me with threats of violence." "Do you have evidence of these accusations?" Alex immediately appeared with his phone. I recorded the entire conversation, including their confessions about murders in multiple states and countries. The younger officer listened to a few seconds of the recording, and his eyes widened. He quickly called for backup on his radio. "Mrs. Vance," Reginald said as they put him in handcuffs, "this isn't over. There are very powerful people involved in this." "I know," I replied, "and I'm sure the FBI will be very interested in talking to you about those powerful people." As the three men were led away, the lead officer explained the procedure. "We'll need you to remain in Las Vegas for a few more days for formal statements. This is going straight to the FBI." "And what about the larger operation?" "With the evidence you have, we can coordinate with authorities in other states and countries where they've operated. This could dismantle the entire network." That night, in the resort restaurant, my family and I finally processed what had happened. "I can't believe we almost killed you, Mom," Emily said, still tearful. "You didn't know what was happening," I comforted her. "You were victims just as much as I was." "But how did you know to call the police?" Megan asked. "Because I decided I had heard enough confessions, and because I realized the only way to stop this was with real evidence." Alex still looked shocked. "When they said they had killed 42 people. "But now they won't kill anymore," I interrupted, "and the families of those victims are finally going to get answers." "And the investors they mentioned?" Megan asked. "The police were never able to connect the dots before. Alex's recording was exactly the evidence they needed." The FBI detective, a man who had stayed at the resort named Agent Miller, explained the magnitude of the operation. "Based on the information they provided, we estimate this network has been responsible for at least 60 murders over the last 4 years. Your evidence has opened investigations in 7 countries. And will you be able to find the people who financed this? We already have arrest warrants for 3 individuals in Switzerland and 2 in the Cayman Islands. Your courage has saved many future lives, Mrs. Vance." But one final revelation awaited me. On the last day, Agent Miller came to speak with me privately. "There's one more thing you need to know," he said. "We looked deeper into how they obtained your information and found something troubling." "What?" "The loan application your daughter-in-law filled out was not real. It was a phishing operation designed specifically to gather information about families like yours." Phishing. A fake website that looked legitimate, but was created only to steal information. And Mrs. Vance, it was sent specifically to your daughter-in-law by someone who knew her financial struggles. My stomach sank. What does that mean? It means someone who knows your family intentionally steered these criminals toward you. Who? We're still investigating. But someone provided detailed information about your finances, your health status, your children's economic situation, information that only someone close to you could possibly have. Are you saying someone in our immediate family or close friends? It's possible, or someone with access to medical, financial, or insurance records, but the information was too specific and too up-to-date to be obtained casually. I returned to Phoenix with this new concern. I had stopped the murderers, but there was someone else closer to home who had betrayed my family, and I was going to find out who it was. Back in Phoenix, things felt different, not just because of the traumatic experience we had been through, but because now I knew someone in my close circle had tried to kill me. Agent Miller had given me a list of the specific information the criminals had about my family. It was terrifyingly detailed. My complete medical records for the last 2 years, Alex and Megan's bank statements for the last 6 months, details about Emily's money problems that I didn't even know, information about my life insurance policy, down to details about my daily routines and where I shopped. Only someone with privileged access to our personal information could have gathered all this. My first suspicion was obvious. Someone at the bank where we all had accounts. But when I discreetly investigated, I found that employees didn't have access to such diverse information. The second possibility was our family doctor, Dr. Smith, who had treated the whole family for 20 years, but he had died 6 months ago of a heart attack. It was Megan who accidentally gave me the first real clue. By the way, she said during a family dinner 2 weeks after our return, do you remember when my cousin Amy helped me with all those insurance forms last year? Amy, my first cousin, Amy Christine Vance. Amy had been very involved in our lives the last year. She had helped Megan with refinancing applications. She had assisted Emily with forms for new clients. She had been helpful at reviewing my insurance policy after I turned 67. And Amy had been having serious financial troubles. Her ex-husband had left her massive debts after the divorce, and she had lost her house last year. What kind of help did Amy give them exactly? I asked casually. Well, she knew people at banks and insurance companies, Megan explained. She helped us fill out forms, gave us tips on how to improve our applications. And did she have access to our financial documents? Sure. She needed to see them to help us properly. Perfect. Amy had access to all the information the criminals possessed, but I needed to be sure before making accusations. I discreetly called Agent Miller. Agent, can you track exactly how my family was contacted by these criminals? Let me check. Yes, here it is. The first contact was through a form your daughter-in-law filled out online, but the link to that form came through an email from someone named Amy Vance. My blood ran cold. Amy sent them the link directly? According to our records, yes. An email saying she had found a financial opportunity that could help with their money problems. Amy had not only provided my information to the murderers, she had actively steered them toward my family. Agent, does this make her an accomplice to attempted murder? If it can be proven that she knew the link would lead to criminal activity, absolutely. But there was the problem. Did Amy know she was sending her cousin to her death, or had she been manipulated too? I decided to confront her directly. Amy now lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of Phoenix since she lost her house. When I arrived unannounced that afternoon, she looked terrible. She had lost weight, had deep dark circles under her eyes, and her apartment was a mess. Carol, she said, clearly surprised to see me. What are you doing here? We need to talk, Amy. About what? About the email you sent Megan 6 months ago, about loan forms. Her face changed immediately. The color completely drained away. I don't know what you're talking about. Amy, I was almost killed. And it all started with that email of yours. She sank heavily onto her couch, as if her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Killed? I don't understand. I told her the whole story. The desert, the criminals, the murder operation, how they had used the information she had provided. As I spoke, Amy began to cry. Carol, I didn't know. I swear on my mother's grave that I didn't know. Then what did you know? I was desperate for money. I had lost everything after the divorce. A man approached me. He said he worked for a market research company. He offered me $500 to provide information about families I knew, just for demographic studies. $500? That was a lot of money to me then. And it seemed innocent, just basic information about economic situations, health, things like that. And then what happened? Then they asked me to send the link to Megan. They said it was a research form that could qualify her for real financial opportunities. And you never suspected anything? Carol, I was living out of my car. I didn't have money for food. When someone offers you $500 to send an email, you don't ask too many questions. I could see she was telling the truth. Amy had been manipulated too, but her desperation had made her an accomplice. Who was the man who contacted you? His name was Richard Moore. He said he worked for a marketing firm called Insights America. I immediately called Agent Miller with this information. Agent, I have a name, Richard Moore, Insights America. Let me check. Mrs. Vance, there's no record of any company called Insights America. And we've seen the name Richard Moore in other investigations related to this network. Is he one of the investors? He's what we call a local recruiter, someone who identifies potential victims and gathers initial information. There are probably dozens like him across different states. And can you arrest him? If you can give us contact information, absolutely. Amy didn't have current contact info for Richard, but she remembered where they had met, a specific coffee shop in downtown Phoenix. Agent Miller coordinated with the Phoenix PD to set up surveillance at that coffee shop. They only had to wait 3 days. Richard Moore turned out to be exactly what we expected, a small-time criminal who recruited local victims for the international network. When they arrested him, he immediately negotiated information about the organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. His information led to the arrest of 8 more recruiters in Arizona, California, and Texas. But the most satisfying part came when Agent Miller called me with final news. Mrs. Vance, the investigations have led to the arrest of the main investors. 5 millionaires who financed the operation have been arrested in 3 countries. Their assets have been frozen, and the money is being used to compensate the victims' families. And what about Amy? Given that she clearly didn't know about the murders and cooperated completely with the investigation, she won't be prosecuted, but she will have to testify in several trials. 6 months later, I was sitting in my backyard in Phoenix, reading a newspaper article about the final trial of the murder network. Reginald and his associates had been sentenced to life in prison. The investors faced similar sentences. The operation had been completely dismantled. Amy had used some of the compensation money she received to move into a better apartment and start a small, legitimate consulting business. She had learned her lesson about deals that sounded too good to be true. My children had used the compensation money to pay off their debts and had insisted on installing the best possible security system in my house. "Mom," Alex told me during Sunday dinner, "do you ever have nightmares about what happened?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I also sleep better knowing I helped stop criminals who had killed over 60 people." "Was the risk worth it?" Emily asked. I thought about that question as I sipped my coffee. Had it been worth almost dying to expose an international murder ring? "Look," I finally told them, "these criminals picked the wrong woman to murder. They thought a 67-year-old retired teacher would be an easy mark." "And you weren't?" Megan asked with a smile. "Not at all, because there's one thing they didn't understand about Carol Elizabeth Vance. I spent 30 years teaching teenagers. After that, a few international murderers weren't all that intimidating." My children laughed, but I was serious. When you've survived 3 decades in a classroom, you can survive anything. Now you tell me, have you ever received weird emails or calls about unexpected inheritances? Because after everything I've lived through, I can tell you if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And if you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, remember, bullies of any age only work if you let them intimidate you. Carol Elizabeth Vance was never a woman to be intimidated, and at 67, I wasn't about to start now.